I admit, capturing candid moments and freezing moving subjects to a photo is not my best asset. I find it very challenging, technically demanding, and artistically can be off-putting. The most common issues I have when shooting moving subjects are getting blurry images, bad framing, and the difficulty in getting the best quality image by adjusting the triangle of exposure, namely the speed rate, ISO, and the aperture. Now, what I learned over the years is that knowing to use the right settings of your camera to capture an image, whether the subject is still or moving, will make a massive difference on how well you will capture an image. Now, the RICOH GRIII camera is a pocket size. In fact, it is a point-and-shoot digital camera that is comparable to the DSLR or the mirrorless camera when it comes to its manual operations. On this video, I carry the RICOH GRIII camera with me on my latest trip to Belgium during the Formula 1 Grand Prix weekend. Not only I used it to document and capture images street style, but also I used this to practice and test the camera's capability in capturing fast-moving subjects, and also to use its drive mode, which is a feature that enables you to take continuous multiple shots. Now, I am not a sports photographer, and shooting fast subjects is not really my forte, and I don't claim myself to be an expert in this field. But knowing the fundamentals in photography and how to expose an image, I simply apply this information in this scenario to capture fast-moving subjects, likewise in experimenting in long exposures. Whilst I agree that taking sharp images is the standard in exposing an image, I also believe that blurry images and the use of long exposure can also be a form of art and an expression of one's artistic freedom. On this video, I will show you how I captured fast-moving subjects using high speed rates, and likewise in getting blurry images by using low speed rates. Now, for the lower speed rate images, be aware that this is not a proper long exposure shoot. I'm not using a tripod, and I did not have an anti-filter to have the ideal scenario to call it as a proper long exposure shooting. Therefore, all of the pictures that you see here were shot handheld and were exposed appropriately without an anti-filter. Therefore, I can only push the lowest speed rate to the setting that will allow me to not overexpose the image. Now, this is how I use the RICOH GRIII camera with high speed rates. The maximum speed you can set using the camera is 1/4000, with a minimum aperture or f-stop from 5.6, meaning as soon as your aperture goes down to 5.0, the speed goes down to a maximum of 1/3200. And if the aperture is less than 4.0, the maximum speed you can set it is up to 1/2500. For me, to get sharp images when shooting fast-moving subjects, try to aim to set your speed above at least 1/1000 to a maximum of 1/4000 if exposure permitting. Now, the challenge when setting your camera speed to 1/4000 is that you will get a dark exposure. Now, this is where you have to adjust your exposure settings such as your ISO and your aperture to balance the exposure of your image. Now, I think this was easier for me to do because I was shooting outdoors with decent natural lighting. Therefore, I didn't have to increase much of my ISO, and it was around 400 to 800 level. And for my aperture, I experimented in keeping it high, and if need be, I have the option to shoot lower down to 2.8 to get more light to expose the image. Now, to capture moving subjects, I set the camera into drive, which is a continuous mode to capture moving subjects. To use the drive mode, I continuously pressed the shutter button and I panned the camera and followed the moving subjects from right to left. For the settings of the blurry or long exposure style images, I dropped my speed down to 1/20 to 1/80. With lower speed rates, it is imperative to adjust your ISO to the lowest number and to increase your aperture to properly expose the image. To explain this, when you lower down your speed, your image will be very bright and overexposed. Therefore, to reduce the brightness of your exposure, you need to lower down the ISO and increase your aperture to compensate for it. This is why in long exposure shooting, an ND filter is very helpful to properly control the exposure, because without the ND filter and using low speed rates, this can lead you to an overexposed image. Also, this is why knowing your exposure triangle is very helpful, because regardless of what camera you use, be it a mirrorless, DSLR or a digital camera, if you shoot manual, all rules apply to how you shoot or expose your image, regardless of what camera brand you have. Shooting in manual mode using the RICOH GRIII camera is actually the same as shooting using DSLR or mirrorless cameras. And that's what I like about the RICOH GRIII camera. It still gives you the immersive experience to shoot just like using the bigger size DSLR or mirrorless cameras. Now, just a general observation using the drive mode. Despite very high speed rates, the continuous shooting mode isn't as snappy or as quick as the mirrorless cameras. It takes lesser number of continuous images, and looking at the screen, it's very slow in showing you the actual snaps of the images that you are capturing. However, it's still capable in capturing sharp and clear images. For the low speed shots, I know it's going to be a hit and miss opportunity, and I wasn't sure at this stage how it will perform. But surprisingly, it still managed to capture some interesting and artistic shots. Of course, with the continuous mode, you can't expect all shots to be perfect. It will be a case of having some good and not so good images. And the good thing about this is that you are able to choose the best images out from the batch. The RICOH GRIII camera is a small yet a powerful camera. When used with the right settings to capture images, it delivers, and it sets the bar high when it comes to image quality. Whilst it is true that not all cameras are perfect, the RICOH GRIII camera too has its own limitations and imperfections. But I guess when it comes to capturing images, it's about being familiar with the features of your camera and being able to use it to your advantage and to its full potential. It's also about taking the time to learn, to practice, and to perfect your craft and continually improve yourself and your skills to your creative satisfaction.